You know, in this day and age of streaming, I'm definitely not alone when I say that album art is, no pun intended, but it's a little bit of a lost art. I'm a little too young to have been part of going to the store back in the day to buy vinyl. When I grew up, it was CDs, which obviously way smaller than vinyl, but still, it was an amazing feeling going to the store, finding an album that had some incredible artwork. But it's just not the same anymore at all. That said, though, with so many great album covers, of course, there was bound to be some controversy over the artwork, whether it was something depicting extreme violence, sex, touching on sensitive events, whatever it may be. Let's take a look at 20 of the most controversial rock and metal album covers of all time. I actually want to start off this list doing two albums at the same time, arguably the most non-controversial on this list, and that would be the 1966 debut from the Mamas and the Papas, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears, and the Rolling Stones' 1968 release, Beggars, Banquet. The reason that I want to do these two together is because they were actually hit with controversy for the same exact reasons, something rather tame compared to the rest of this list and just things today in general. Toilets. The Mamas and the Papas cover also featured the band sharing a bathtub, fully clothed nonetheless, with Michelle Phillips laying across the guys in the band. But shockingly, it was the toilet that caused the problem, because that was considered taboo back in the 60s. And it caused so much controversy that the album actually ended up with four alternate covers, all in some way. There's actually a grammatical error on the cover with the way that the band name was written, but that was not fixed on any of the four alternate covers. With the Stones, and what I would argue to be the better known version with the toilet and the graffiti wall, that was actually intended to be the original, but was rejected due to the toilet, which actually delayed the album's release for a number of months, with the band eventually settling on something more plain, with just the band name and the album name, but written as sort of an invitation to the banquet, if you will. The original artwork actually didn't surface until the 80s on some reissues, and a fun fact, the bathroom photo was actually taken at a Porsche dealership in Los Angeles. Moving on, and by the way, there's no real order of the way that we're doing this list here. We're going to be bouncing around decades and genres, but it's Ministry's 1999 album, Dark Side of the Spoon. The cover has a naked fat chick with a dunce cap sitting in front of a blackboard that says, "I will be God," all over it, Bart Simpson style. The original idea from Ministry leader Al Jorgensen was to have a child drawing on the blackboard, but bassist Paul Barker instead suggested having the fat woman to evoke the image of quote-unquote fattened Americans doing what they're told. The album was subsequently banned from Kmart, which honestly, that's probably why they had a major decline, and there's only like 20 Kmarts left nationwide. Moving on to a legendary 80s album, it's Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet from 1986. The album was originally intended to be called Wanted Dead or Alive, after the way overplayed song, but after a visit to a Canadian strip club, the band settled on Slippery When Wet, releasing with the album cover everybody knows with the wet trash bag that says Slippery When Wet. The original cover, though, has a chick in a wet yellow t-shirt that says the name of the album, but this was changed to the garbage bag due to fears that retailers would not stock the album due to the woman on it, and John Bon Jovi not liking the pink border around the photo, which I agree, it looks lame. It makes it kind of look a bit like a pop album, but I guess it does make sense. It is Bon Jovi after all. Anyways, though, the cover with the original cover with the chick was actually used for the Japanese release. On to the next one. It's Far Beyond Driven, Pantera's 1994 album. We all know the artwork with the drill going into the skull, but the original idea was unsurprisingly rejected by their label Elektra, and was far more graphic, featuring a drill going into, how shall I put this? Let's just say there was some backdoor drilling going on. However, the backdoor cover was used for all the vinyl releases, though. Let's head back to 1966 for this next one. It's Yesterday and Today from the Beatles. The band's label Capitol actually recalled 750,000 copies of the album due to the severe backlash. While Headless Baby Dolls and Chunks of Meat might not seem like a whole lot in 2023, it definitely caused quite a stir back in '66. The band claims that the cover was in protest of the Vietnam War, but the original intention from the photographer was to showcase just how hardcore fans were about the Beatles. Either way, though, an alternate cover was eventually released featuring the band in and around nothing but a trunk. Moving on to a cover that only became controversial amid tragedy, although the tragedy actually happened just days after the release. It's 1977 Street Survivors from Lynyrd Skynyrd. And of course, if you know anything about the band, I'm sure you can guess where this is going. The album was released on October 17th, 1977, just 3 days before the fatal plane crash that killed three band members, including vocalist Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, and his older sister, backup singer Cassie Gaines, among others. Upon the crash, the artwork with the band standing in flames seemed in poor taste, so they removed the background altogether with a new photo of the band in front of just a black background. Obviously, the album title Street Survivor stayed, but I don't think I need to explain the irony in that one. On to one of my favorite albums of this list. It's 1999's CKY Volume 1. The original artwork, which was released via an indie label, featured an animated depiction of politician Bud Dwyer committing suicide, which actually happened on live TV back in 1987 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, not far from the band's hometown of Westchester. But upon the band signing to Volcom and the label re-releasing it, the cover changed to a photo of the band's guitar player Chad Ginsburg at Warped Tour. The photo honestly should have probably been of Darren Miller, the band's main songwriter, vocalist, and guitarist, but I digress. Moving on to arguably the most fucked up and tasteless cover on this entire list. It's the Eric Clapton and Steve Winwood supergroup Blind Faith's only album, the 1969 self-titled. I'm not even going to put a censored version up, as it's just so questionable, and honestly, it's really damn gross, but it's simply a young, topless girl holding a toy. She was actually offered a horse for doing the photo, but instead they decided to pay her 40 pounds. Due to the obvious controversy, an alternate cover was issued featuring just the band and the name of the album, which is honestly what they probably should have went with from the start, regardless if it was some sort of message, political or not. I don't know if it was, but just saying, it doesn't matter. Still creepy as fuck. Next up, it's Mondo Sexhead from Rob Zombie in 2012. Ever the loving and supportive husband, the cover, of course, featured Rob's wife, Sherry Moon Zombie, on the cover, showing off her bare ass. Though it would remain unchanged for the vinyl version, the cover obviously caused controversy, so Sherry and her ass were replaced with just a cat. With Rob Zombie very humorously noting that he, quote, just removed the ass shot and replaced it with a shot. Coming up next, it's the Black Crowes' Amorica from 1994. The album cover famously features a close-up of a woman wearing an American flag thong, which was actually taken from the cover of the July 1976 issue of Hustler magazine. What's most notable about the photo, though, is that there is hair sticking out. Obviously, this was a no-no for stores like Kmart and Walmart, so an alternate cover was issued with a black background and nothing but the thong. Up next, and probably one of the few on this list that really just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, at least to me, it's Poison's second album, 1988's Open Up and Say Ah, featuring a model named Bambi portraying a red demon with very 80s hair and a massive Gene Simmons-style tongue. This, for whatever reason, caused quite a stir, especially with some parental groups. So the record was reissued with a new cover that was pretty cropped, really only showing the demon's eyes. Jumping ahead just a year to 1989, next up is Mother's Milk from Red Hot Chili Peppers. The album's cover includes a topless woman holding small versions of the band members and being covered up with a rose and the placement of frontman Anthony Kiedis in the photo. The model on the cover, though, Donna Lane, was not aware that her photo was going to be used for the cover, so she actually ended up suing the band and won $50,000. Following the album's release, a limited number of posters showing the full uncensored photo were also issued. Moving on to one of the most controversial artists on this entire list, and an album that retailers actually refused to stock a month before it was even out. It's Marilyn Manson's Mechanical Animals, released in 1998. The alien-esque cover art for the concept album, obviously super iconic, but it was also highly, highly controversial. So due to that and the expectation that it would bear the parental advisory sticker, Target, Walmart, and Kmart all refused to sell it. A compromise was offered, which would have included a sticker that would have covered Manson's chest and have the entire album wrapped in blue cellophane, and Walmart still refused. They would also eventually pull his entire catalog in 1999 in light of Columbine, though eventually circled back when he had a top 10 with the Golden Age of Grotesque, because money talks. Next up, it's 1995's Balance from Van Halen. The cover, of course, features conjoined twins playing on a seesaw. This is another one I just don't really get it. It doesn't really make sense why this would bother people. Nonetheless, though, it did, with Japan noting a quote-unquote cultural offense to the artwork. So an edited version was released in that territory that had one of the twins completely removed from the photo. Up next, as we close in on the remaining few of this list, it's the debut solo album from Pink Floyd's Roger Waters, 1984's The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. This cover is rather straightforward, depicting a blonde woman hitchhiking, though with her bare ass fully exposed. Most of the edits on this list, they feature cropping or some sort of airbrushing or whatever to remove the controversial part. But in this scenario, they just said, fuck it, slap a black box on that ass. Getting a little funky on this next one, it's the Electric Spanking of War Babies, what a name, released in 1981 by Funkadelic. Originally intended to be a double album, the original artwork features a naked woman in a spaceship shaped like a dong. When Warner Brothers inevitably opposed the artwork, it was edited to cover up a majority of the art with just a bunch of green and some text that read, "Oh, look, the cover that they," which was in quotations, "were too scared to print." Arguably the most famous on this list, and I just did an entire video on this artwork, which I'll put a link to down below. I wasn't going to really include this, but I thought, you can't really do a video like this without talking about it, even though it's probably been overdone. It is, of course, 1987's Appetite for Destruction, the masterpiece debut from Guns N' Roses. The original cover features this big red monster up in the sky that's about to attack a robot down on the street below that is attacking a woman who's laying on the sidewalk, fully exposed. The cover was actually a painting from Robert Williams that bears the same name as the album. The cover, of course, was replaced with the iconic cross and skulls representing each member of the band that we all know and love. Imagine, though, the controversy that would have ensued had they rolled with Axl's original idea, the famous photo of the Challenger explosion that graced the cover of Time magazine. We're actually going to close this list out the same way we started it, doing two albums at once, but this time they're both from the same artist. The artist, Alice Cooper. The albums, Love It to Death in 1971, and the follow-up, School's Out in 1972. I honestly never even realized the quote-unquote issue with Love It to Death until doing this episode. But the cover is just a photo of the band with Alice sticking his finger through, I guess, the zipper hole in his pants in true Michael Scott fashion. But so an alternate version was eventually released that removed his entire right arm. But I just feel like this really isn't something that you would really notice unless you were like very intensely studying the cover of the record. The original pressing of School's Out, on the other hand, features the actual record wrapped in panties, And given the majority of this list, you would probably think that that was the problem, which it was, but not for the reason that you're likely thinking. The problem, and honestly, this is no joke, is that the underwear was not fireproof, which caused issue with the Federal Trade Commission. Definitely worth a little bit of money, though, if you're lucky enough to have a copy. All right, going to do a real quick bonus here, because how could you possibly do a list on controversial album covers without including this? And it is, of course, none other than 1982's Smell the Glove from Spinal Tap. The quote-unquote original cover featured, as described in the movie, quote, a greased, naked woman on all four with a dog collar around her neck and a leash and a man's arm extended out up to here, holding onto the leash and pushing a black glove in her face to sniff it. For the alternate version, the one that ended up being released, the cover was nothing but black, like all black, no text or anything, just all black. It's like, how much more black could this be? And the answer is none. None more black. All right, though, I gotta run. There's so many more albums that we could have covered. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. But for now, my fiance is waiting to act out the title of Nigel Tufnell's piano song that's in the key of D minor, so I gotta go. But thanks so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you next time.